Hi friends, happy Monday. Hopefully everybody is enjoying the start of a new week. I'm excited to tune in with you guys maybe over your lunch break and bring you another episode of Learn with Lo. I really wanted to start out today sharing a really cool message that I got from one of my potential patients this week. I feel like this is something that I get quite frequently, and I'm always about kind of sharing a little bit behind the scenes of what it's like to work with myself and a lot of the different things that we do in our completely different way of modeling healthcare at the Lowdown. So I'm going to read you guys this message. I think it kicks off today beautifully. I got this awesome message and it said, "Hey Lauryn, I was referred to your page by a friend who's a current client of yours, and she said you helped her tackle some gut issues, and I'm wondering if you can help me. I've struggled with IBS and painful periods for 7+ years. I've been through both conventional specialists as well as functional medicine doctors with little to no long-term results. I've tried prescription medications, over-the-counter medications. I've tried natural and homeopathic remedies that only have just taken some of the edge off, with no one really being able to figure out what's going on. What is different about what you offer, and how do you address individual patient concerns?" Be still my heart. I love this. And not that I like this experience for her, but I feel like I see this so often, right? And it's very, very frustrating from an overall patient perspective of kind of knowing where to navigate. But I love that she asked this question of like, what sets you apart? How are you different in being able to address different patient concerns? And I think that, what a wise question to ask as a patient, and more wanting to help people kind of find some of these questions for themselves. So it was just great to, obviously, like I said, I had a conversation with her, but really, long story short, it helped me pause and reflect on how am I different? How do I want to set myself apart? What are different strategies and belief systems and modalities that I use that set me apart from all the other individuals out there that are also practicing some of this same mindset around medicine, right? So I loved being able to really kind of pause and reflect and share. I want to share with you guys some of the answers that I feel like I kind of came to, and I'm like, what sets the Lowdown different? How do I kind of tackle patient treatment strategies? Right? So with me, you're definitely going to get a integrative, holistic, right? Whole meaning H-O or W-H-O-L-E, right? A very holistic view of the body, not segmented parts and pieces approach, right? You're also going to get more of a functional approach, which means root cause, right? We're going to treat the body as a whole, but 2, we're also going to be looking for the root cause of the body as a whole. So you're not going to get band-aids and treatments that simply mask the symptoms for a short term, only to have them come back if you don't come back for regular sessions or whatever it is, right? It's like, what's the root cause? You're also with me at the Lowdown going to get a comprehensive mind-body medicine approach, right? We do not ignore the role of mental health and emotional health and spiritual health here. We include that all in our physical health because we're all one body, right? And you're also going to get educated on your body from the inside out. You are the hero and you are the healer of your own journey. I just simply am the guide, right? I'm the person that's got a GPS. You're ultimately, though, in the driver's seat, and we can navigate that journey together. And also recognize that at the Lowdown, you're going to get a lot of support, and you're going to get a lot of repetition in that support, because I want you to have resources even outside of our sessions, because you're going to be working through ways to create new belief systems, new habits for change, right? So that's not done overnight, and that's not done with just one pill, one supplement, walk out the door, see you next time, right? It's very much a all-encompassing specific approach where we talk about nutritional patterns. We're going to be addressing the microbiome. We're going to be talking about things like potential toxin burden. We're going to be talking about your subconscious brain and your rewiring the past fight or flight nervous system patterns that are keeping you stuck. We're going to utilize labs and supplements and lifestyle, right? That is my prescription of medicine, and welcome to the Lowdown, right? So I know that you guys, like I said, if you guys have been following along for a while now, you guys have heard me talk about that, but I thought it was a great opportunity for anybody that maybe was new here or just tuning in, to really be able to understand like, oh yeah, I might have seen other conventional practitioners talking about my gut, but they didn't talk to me about nutrition other than eliminate this food, eliminate that food, don't eat this. It's like, that's not nutrition, right? That's not what we're talking about. Although we will talk about healing diet strategies for sure, it's not about restriction. It's not about deprivation, right? That's not talking about nutrition. That's just another Band-Aid approach, right? Or maybe you've been to other functional practitioners that ran labs and put you on supplement protocols. I'm like, yeah, but that's not the right order of operations, right? So it's just, like I said, it's very different in being able to understand the body as an integrated piece. It's all one. And also how we can influence a positive domino effect all the way up the chain when we understand that the body is all one, but we also know how to peel it back to root cause connections, right? So I think that, like I said, that's very helpful for people to kind of hear if that feels like it resonates with you as a style of medicine that you've been looking for, right? So in keeping with this theme of this holistic approach, we always want to use every symptom, every lab marker. It's a clue for us, right? It's a clue that leads us closer to the understanding of your full picture of health. So last week we really talked about a case study example of individuals that come to me with repetitive symptoms, right? Last week we talked a lot about how things like the gallbladder function and specifically bile production can cause a whole list of different symptoms that sometimes aren't really connected together in more of a conventional medicine model. Like if someone has cholesterol issues, they have hypothyroidism, they're struggling with bloating, and they're even maybe struggling with low vitamin D status, right? Like all of those things, it's like, oh, I didn't know all of those fit together. It's like, yes, we need to be thinking about gallbladder bile. This week is no different. I want to bring you guys another case study example. This one I have been seeing more and more frequently in my practice and getting good at, like I said, being able to recognize it and really give people a whole different view than maybe they've tried in the past. So today we're going to be thinking about a particular person that presents with some of the following symptoms: weight gain or weight loss resistance. I know that perks a lot of people's attention. They're like, that's me. I feel like I don't understand why my body is changing the way that it is. So if you're experiencing things like weight gain or weight loss resistance, maybe that's also coupled with quite a bit of unexplained fatigue. Even if you feel like you're sleeping well, you feel like you don't wake up rested. Also, if you're experiencing a lot of blood sugar dysregulation, blood sugar highs, blood sugar lows. Maybe it's showing up on labs as blood sugar highs and lows, but you feel like you eat a relatively clean diet, or no matter how clean you eat, you still have a ton of cravings, specifically sugar cravings. Maybe you also experience things like headaches or brain fog. Maybe you also experience some chronic sinus issues like drainage, phlegm, congestion, postnasal drip, or any recurring rashes, especially skin rashes that occur in like high moisture area, like armpits, underneath the breast line, in your groin, right? So it's like, oh man, weight gain, fatigue, brain fog, headaches, allergy symptoms, rashes, and blood sugar. If you feel like you hit multiple of those, I'm talking 3 or more of those symptoms, you can probably bet that they're all connected together. I'll let you guys take a guess now in kind of this little moment of pause, like where do you think a lot of those things might be connected together, or where might we start to look from an overall holistic or root cause perspective? If you started to think yeast or fungal infections, I would agree with you, right? If that was like, whoa, Lauryn, yeast and fungal infections, a way off base, like that's not what I was thinking at all, then that's where this is a great opportunity to kind of think outside the box maybe a little bit, right? Because it's not uncommon that I see individuals with a lot of these symptoms, and by doing some more digging, actually being able to piece this all together, right? When we think of yeast and fungal infections and yeast and fungal overgrowth, let's just start at high level. What are examples of this? What the heck do you mean when you say yeast and fungal infections? Because a lot of times we think of like the typical, I don't know, like athlete's foot kind of fungal infection, or for women, you might think of classic like a yeast infection or like a bacterial vaginosis kind of infection or a UTI, right? Those types of things make us think about yeast, right? But you're like, weight gain and my sugar cravings and my fatigue and my brain fog and my my rashes on my skin or my allergies, I'm like, bet you didn't kind of correlate some of those together, right? So when I think about, like, let's just think like high level terms for our situation here today. Obviously we can get into the weeds of microbiology here, but I'll try to keep it simple so that it's like 101, we can get what we need and kind of take and run with it. So let's just get some kind of biology terms out there just so that we are all in the same playing field here when I use some of these terms. So fungus, that's the large umbrella term. When we want to think about underneath fungus, there are going to be different subtypes of fungus, right? So fungus is like the big umbrella term. Underneath fungus, there's going to be different subtypes. One of those subtypes can be yeast. Yeast is a certain type of fungus. Now, are there multiple different types of yeast? Yes, there are. Probably one of the most widely known and widely tested for types of yeast would be like a Candida kind of infection, right? So if you've heard of Candida before, that's kind of, like I said, a type of yeast, which is a type of fungus, right? So fungus, yeast, Candida. And then if we even think about Candida as itself, as a yeast, it gives off secondary metabolites that we call mycotoxins, right? These mycotoxins can cause a range of health effects, all the way from what we call kind of like acute effects, all the way to long-term effects, immune deficiencies, metabolic dysfunction, right? So that's what I mean when I'm starting to correlate some of these like yeast and fungal type conversations with broad spectrum symptoms, right? It's not just a UTI or not just an athlete's foot situation. So fungus is the wide umbrella, followed by yeast, followed by things like Candida, and then we talk mycotoxins, right? So just for the sake of our conversation today, I want us to think about really kind of using, now, of course, I know from a scientific literature standpoint, someone's going to come at me about like, those aren't the same thing. I'm fully aware that fungus, yeast, Candida, and mycotoxins are not the same thing. I just explained like how they are very different, but for our sake today, to make it really easy and kind of like the lowdown 101, we're going to be using those terms interchangeably. Fungus, yeast, Candida, mycotoxins. We're talking about what are the downstream effects that people are experiencing and seeing when they're dealing with some of these yeast or fungal infections, and nobody has helped them pinpoint that. And so they're out there kind of treating these symptoms individually, right? Maybe they're treating their weight gain by trying to beat themselves to death, doing calories in, calories out, and a shit ton of cardio. It's like, well, good luck, right? If that's part of your picture, like you're only going to get so far. Or you've been treating your allergies with over-the-counter Allegra and Zyrtec and Flonase every other day. I'm like, cool, you can do that till the cows come home, and like, you're at the point where you'll get allergy shots every other week because I'm allergic to everything under the sun. I'm like, what's going on under the surface, right? So we can like treat all of those things with topical solutions or Band-Aid supplements, but it's not really getting at the root cause, right? That's what I'm all about, is helping people kind of put all the symptoms together and kind of get at the root so that we're not just tackling one symptom, we're tackling all the symptoms, and people aren't out there spinning their wheels trying to find all of these different interventions for a seemingly related approach. So fungus is wide, yeast, Candida, they give off mycotoxins. We're going to be using a lot of those terms interchangeably. What do they do, right? When we have these yeast and fungal infections, what do they do? So yeast is really, I mean, honestly, specifically if we talk about Candida as a type of yeast, right? It's actually a commensal, meaning it's not a bad guy, right? It only is bad if it gets the chance to overgrow, right? So Candida by itself is what we call a commensal yeast. It's found in the microbiome of not just the gut, but the skin, the oral cavity, even your urogenital tract too contains yeast, right? So it's not always a bad guy, but that's also why yeast symptoms can show up in multiple parts of the body. It's not just localized to just the GI tract, because We find yeast in all sorts of our mucosal membranes, right? So yeast really, like I said, it can sit there in a healthy gut environment and cause zero issues, right? It really just chills there with some of the other bacteria and protozoa in the gut, unless it's provoked to start replicating and overgrowing, right? How does this happen? Usually if the gut pH is altered, which happens in times of stress. Also, if there are poor beneficial bacteria or low beneficial bacteria, which happens when individuals are chronically dieting or not eating a lot of fiber, like the standard American diet, or if someone is really feeding the Candida a lot of food that it loves, which is more of your sugar, flour, ultra processed kind of foods, right? So if any of these environments are there, like I said, lowered gut pH due to stress, poor beneficial bacteria due to things like chronic dieting or low fiber intake, or a diet that's like high in yeast feeding foods, now we could get a perfect storm. And some people have all three of those going on at the same time. So it's like, perfect environment for these things to kind of thrive, right? So long story short, I just want everyone to understand yeast, Candida only becomes bad if it's overgrown, and it only becomes overgrown when there's conditions that signal its overgrowth, right? So really there's kind of three types of overgrowths here that we look at. One is called a commensal overgrowth, meaning like we have Candida, but it's really limited to the GI tract, right? So most of the symptoms are probably going to come from the GI tract. Then we have a secondary overgrowth that's called more invasive overgrowth of Candida. That's when it's not just in the GI tract anymore, it's actually permeated outside of the GI tract and it can get into other tissues of the body. Something like this, we wouldn't necessarily be able to pick up on a stool test. We'll talk about that in a second, but I just wanted to put that out there. And then the highest level of overgrowth would be what we call a systemic infection. It's now permeated into the bloodstream and other tissues. This is the most severe, it's most symptomatic, and usually by this point, the immune system has started to create antibodies against the Candida or the fungal overgrowth. So it can kind of, like I said, vary in range of severity, which then also means it varies in range of symptoms and also varies in range of treatment strategies. Obviously, the earlier you catch it and at the earlier stages, it tends to be easier to treat. At broader overgrowth rates, it can be a little bit of a gnarly one, right? But once we realize and recognize it's there, it's causing issues, we can start to put some interventions in place so that you're not out there chasing your tail, trying to continuously on this road of like, eat less, move more, eat less, move more. I'm like, I've seen so many people try to do that and literally run themselves into the ground when they have some of these gut issues actually at the core, right? So what conditions, we kind of already laid the groundwork for this, but I just want to kind of be a little bit more detailed of what conditions can cause Candida overgrowth, right? Or what type of patterns or habits or behaviors that could put somebody at risk for this. Number one is going to be your high sugar, low fiber diets. Enter the standard American diet, right? So if we're doing a lot of ultra processed foods, which are really just kind of like all of the foods that are kind of found like in the central of the grocery store, right? Lots of the chips and the crackers and the granola bars and the cereals and a lot of those things that have 1,000,001 ingredients on them and they have a shelf life of under 5 years if you don't open it, like those would be considered more of our ultra processed foods. Low fiber intake is obviously not eating a ton of produce or plant volume, so that can also contribute as well too. So high sugar, low fiber diet, Candida loves that. Just go ahead and feed it, why don't you? Besides that, you'll also see a lot of these yeast or fungal overgrowths in somebody that has chronic constipation or slow time traveling through the bowels, whether it's gastroparesis, hypothyroidism, low stomach acid, chronic constipation, individuals that are on even some of our like weight loss peptides out there, like that's the whole goal, is that they slow digestive emptying. So some people, like I said, it's not the factor, but it can be a contributing factor to slow digestive motility, can produce some of those yeast and fungal overgrowths. Individuals that have had a lot of antibiotic use in the past, that absolutely can contribute because we've killed off our good guys too. Hormonal birth control. Gotta love that one, right? Specifically, the types of birth control with higher estrogen levels in them, because those then release more glucose into the system, which is more sugar for the gut to thrive, or the Candida to thrive in the gut, right? So Yes, high sugar, low fiber. Yes, antibiotic use. Yes, hormonal birth control use. If somebody has a lot of chronic stress, yes, that can absolutely lower our immune tolerance and our beneficial bacteria. It also alters the gut pH. And then we do see a really big connection here with use of things like pesticides and specifically things like glyphosate, right? We've shown through studies that this glyphosate can take out some of the good guys, especially like bifidobacteria strains that live in the gut and are protective against Candida. So if we kind of look at our standard American world and standard American diet, it's like, oh yeah, I could see multiple different avenues where somebody could, it's not like one thing that infects the system, but it's kind of like a series of 1,000 cuts, right? That set up this ultimate situation where this guy can thrive. And now we end up with a whole host of different issues, seemingly unrelated issues, but yet they are very related. And when you have, like I said, somebody that understands how to look at it from a comprehensive picture, you tend to get more of a comprehensive treatment strategy instead of just the runaround of a bunch of Band-Aid solutions. So and that's a big if, not knocking anything. Our conventional medicine system just isn't really trained to identify or look at these things, right? They're going to take all of these separate symptoms at face value and treat and help you manage those symptoms, right? That's what conventional medicine does. It's not set up for chronic stuff. It's set up for like emergency acute care. So a big if your conventional medicine practitioner suspects a yeast or a fungal influence to your symptoms, they may run a blood test, which honestly won't catch anything unless it's like a severe state and they're running like Candida antibody testing. But even if they don't, at the very least, they could put you on a 10 to 14 day course of antifungal treatments like fluconazole or nystatin, right? At best, these just treat some of the yeast, which is fine. Some of your symptoms might diminish, but it's probably going to come raging back very soon after stopping the antifungal treatment because you didn't address anything about the environment that caused it to grow to begin with. Insert the conventional medicine hamster wheel, right? So that's where I want you to think a little differently, right? So just like we talked about a different approach to looking at symptoms as a whole and like integrating the body, I want you to think of it very similar, from the weight loss and the skin rashes to, weight gain to skin rashes, fatigue and brain fog and blood sugar dysregulation and cravings, right? And allergy symptoms. It's like, what do we want to think about? How do we zoom out and start to put this picture together? So the low-down method to approaching things like yeast and Candida overgrowth is going to look very different for a good reason, because I don't want to just treat the yeast and fungal overgrowth, like you said, with a Band-Aid solution and then have it rip roaring back. I want to help you really fix the terrain as a whole, right? How is the environment promoted that growth? Because if we don't address the environment and we just try to address the Candida, like that's not going to work, right? It's a secondary condition for a reason. So number one, how do I think about this? I'm just going to give you guys kind of a high level overview, because if you suspect that you're in this camp, you're like, what the heck do I do? Or I've been working with other providers, and have they done it this way? Or maybe, like I said, just like how I started out, you can kind of look at your experience with other providers and understand, like, did they do it that way? Did they go in that same order of operations? And I potentially could be offering something very different as a solution in a good way, something that your body maybe responds to a little bit better. So when I think about this yeast and fungal influence, number one, especially in this mode, I really, really encourage people to test, don't guess. Not that we can't kind of deduce this based off of somebody's symptoms, but it's honestly pretty important to know the type of overgrowth that we're dealing with, and also the severity of the overgrowth that we're seeing, because similar symptoms can be a variety and different antifungal strategies might work for different types, right? So it could be a variety of different symptoms, and if we don't test, we might use the wrong intervention. Maybe we're using an intervention that's more geared towards like bacterial or parasitic overgrowths versus something that's like actually meant for a fungal overgrowth, right? So different types of testing. Number one, someone might suggest blood work. In this case, like I said, you'd have to run like Candida antibodies. So it would have to be at the point where you have a pretty severe systemic infection that your immune system is creating antibodies against the Candida. So Honestly, blood work, not so great for this, to be quite honest with you. A lot of false negatives because you probably won't see an antibody response for the immune system unless it's systemic. So you'll probably get blood work back. It's like, oh, ship shape. And it's like, but you have all of the symptoms for it. So if you just do blood testing, it's probably going to get missed. You're going to get a lot of false negatives. And it doesn't mean that you don't have overgrowths just because it comes back negative on blood work. Second best would be stool testing. My favorite is something called like a GI map test. There's a GI effects test. There's a GI zoomer test. There's lots of different tests out there that are kind of similar. But this is a stool test. So a little bit better than a blood test, I will say. But yeast can often be missed on stool tests just because yeast likes to hide under biofilms. So a lot of times hiding under those biofilms, we don't get to necessarily catch it in a stool test. Womp womp. So doesn't also either tell us like the effect of the invasiveness of it either. So I would say that GI map test is definitely better than blood work, maybe a 50-50 shot whether we pick up an active yeast infection or not in there, right? A yeast or a candida kind of overgrowth. I would say the gold standard, if we're kind of suspecting this, I would push somebody towards something called an organic acid test or an OAT test for short, OAT. This measures 9 different fungal markers. It is a urine test, and it also shows how well the body is equipped to detox as well too. So if we're gonna take care of this, we want to see, is the body ready to detox this, or is it keeping it sequestered away from the immune system as a whole? So I would say, in terms of testing, definitely look into testing if you suspect this for yourself. My gold standard would be something like an OAT test, but then being able to work with a practitioner that can help guide you through that. Best case scenario, if you have the budget for it, would probably be a GI map and an OAT test together. That would give you the most comprehensive view, but depending on what someone's dealing with, I would say go for a GI map or go for an OAT test if we're suspecting some of this Candida type of overgrowth, right? That would be the gold standard to help us see so many different types and the level of invasiveness. And it just makes our treatment strategies so much better and more effective. So to me, don't know why a lot of what I just explained there isn't part of the just accepted and standard treatment, probably because of more of the insurance-based model is what I'm going to guess. They don't know tools like that. It's just more of a niche to find practitioners that understand how to work with these types of tools. So no problem, can help you with that if you feel like you're in that camp. After we do testing, whether it's GI map, OAT test, all of that stuff, now we can kind of address how do we go about this, right? So number one, in order of operations, I'm always going to help somebody address their detox and their drainage pathways first, right? Do not pass go before you, or collect $200 before you open up drainage and detox pathways. So remember that the invasion of some of this yeast and candida, it's always secondary to something else, right? It's a secondary downstream, like what in the environment was causing the perfect storm for that to grow and thrive in the first place. So antifungal or anti-yeast treatments on their own are just Band-Aids at best, right? I guess the best analogy I can give is somebody going through their garden and cutting the weeds by cutting off the leaves of the weed. Like just cut it at the stem and walk away. It's like, no, you need to pick that guy from the root. Like I got to see the roots of that, right? Very similar to Candida. You can't just go around and like trim the stem off the top with an antifungal. Like it's gonna come rip-roaring back. So we have to start with things like the immune system. What about the adrenals? Then we can address things like the liver and drainage and detox pathways. Are you pooping every day? Are you drinking adequate amounts of water? Can we drain from the lymphatic system? Like we need to open up those things. In this same stage or phase, we can also support and optimize the pH of the stomach as well as beneficial bacteria. So this is where we think about low stomach acid, digestive enzymes, short chain fatty acids, fiber, right? All of that good stuff as well too. Lactobacillus strains are really helpful from a probiotic standpoint for this Candida yeast family in my experience too. So love those. Then after all of that, we've tested, we know what we're dealing with, we've opened up drainage and detox, we've supported stomach acidity and the immune system, then we can consider antifungal treatments, right? Some people need it, some people don't. It just kind of, like I said, depends on how the body bounces back from the stuff that we did before. But I always leave that to last intentionally. I intentionally leave that for last because it's not, like I said, the root cause fix, but it can be very helpful. Some people need a little bit extra push. So only once we've addressed the foundations can we go back to this, because otherwise we're not really being integrative or functional in that way. We're not looking at the whole picture to address the root cause. And also Candida clearing without doing all of that foundational work first can have severe die-off symptoms. Like, it's gnarly, right? So you can only move as fast as the body's detox capacities are ready for. So if I can support that with the immune system and the adrenals and stomach acidity and all of that stuff, it can go a little bit more faster, dare I say, right? So then you can always rotate in a variety of different antifungal remedies. I would highly suggest working with a practitioner for this, but there's lots of different ones that can be impactful here, from caprylic acid, oil of oregano, thyme, clove, uva ursi, pot de arco. Like, there's lots of different ones that I can rotate in here. If a treatment is well tolerated, I might bring in something like a biofilm disruptor, right? So this is where you can hear my order of operations, right? It's like phase 1, how does the body respond? Do we need phase 2? Phase 2, how does the body respond? Phase 3, do we need phase 3, right? At any point along the way, the whole point is that we are putting in things to allow the body to self-correct on its own. The body has innate healing systems. We sometimes just need to open up the opportunity for it to do that, right? And that's what we're doing with each phase, so that we don't skip steps and go straight to the antifungal treatments, clip the weed from the stem and don't pull it from the root, and end up with a series of ongoing issues. Like, not what we're here for, right? So I always believe in, like I said, the integrative and root cause approach for each individual patient. That means it's probably tailored to each patient. It's really, I just want patients and providers to be able to understand their symptoms in a more broader sense, right? And really thinking about the body connecting together as a unit, and how our hormone hierarchy really works to address the body in the right order of operations. So if this is something, hearing about those yeast and fungal overgrowth symptoms, you're like, oh my gosh, I am experiencing weight changes. I am experiencing fatigue. I am experiencing headaches and brain fog. I do have a lot of drainage and allergies and congestion and postnasal drip. I do have recurring skin issues. I do have cravings or blood sugar imbalances based off of labs. I'm like, might start to think about this Candida yeast thing, right? So this is a very, very helpful place to start for individuals that are interested in this, is my Renew Your Gut program. You can click the link in my bio, you can go on my website, and you can find an opportunity to sign up for a Renew Your Gut program right then and there. That includes the GI map test. We can always add the oat test on if that's something that you're interested in. But if this feels like you and you're wondering, where do I start? We can always start with my Renew Your Gut program, and that will give us a really great jumping off point to dive into this work together as well too. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Drop any questions you have below. I'm always love all of our nerdy conversations, and I'm excited to touch base with you guys in a couple weeks for another episode of